Hi there, I'm Dr. Felice Gersh, your integrative OBGYN physician. And in just a few minutes, I am going to invite on my dear friend, Dr. Aly Cohen, to join me to talk about her wonderful new book, all about chemicals and safe living. So she's going to go into it in much more detail, but I just want to try out my new Instagram room with you and see if this is working. So far, so good. I don't usually do these interviews, so I'm a little rusty. So bear with me if I struggle a little bit. I'm not the most tech savvy person, but I'm going to see if I can put in an invite here. I'm excited.
Hello.
I know.
Okay, I just got my cat from going outside. That scared the bejeebers out of my cat. How are you, Felice?
Great. I just had a little tech anxiety because I haven't, now it's so simple. Anyway, but I hadn't done one of these joint interviews for quite some time. So this is great. Now that we're doing it, we'll do it all the time.
I think
It was
this is fun. I think we're just going to hang out by video now from East Coast, West Coast representing. That's wonderful. So good to see you.
we have a lovely day here in sunny California as well.
Not so sunny here in New Jersey, but it's nice enough. It's not raining. So we'll take that as the first day in 4 days that it hasn't been raining.
Well, that's why everything is so green, though.
Yeah, it's pretty lush around here, actually. Yeah. So
We got to talk about how to have a green life, right?
I am not a green thumb. This is natural. This is not my work. This is God's work, right? But I like to tend to it. I like to at least make what's around me a little bit better. But yeah, I don't have a green thumb. I'm not sure if you do.
Well, I have a very nice gardener who helps me. But I love looking at, all of us know how stress is a terrible thing and it harms your health. And looking at nature, being in nature, looking at flowers and green leaves and all is just wonderful. But we have to have a healthy planet
Right.
to have right plants, and we need to have healthy people to make new people and who are healthy. And so I'm so excited about your book. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive into it and tell everyone about the title and what inspired you to write it, and a little bit about what they can expect when they read it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. So yeah, the book, this is the third book I've put together. The first two were actually, one was a textbook that I wrote or I co-edited with my amazing mentor, Dr. Frederick vom Saal, who was largely responsible for the research on bisphenol A, which was removed from plastic baby bottles in 2012 in the US consumer market. But it is still very pervasive. It was a win. It was a win, and now it's being taken out, by the way, in Canadian food packaging, which is really remarkable. It took a lot of years, but it's been an uphill battle for him, but and his colleagues. But the idea was that was the first book that I actually worked with Fred vom Saal, and I was honored. And we had 26 of the world's leading researchers on artificial food coloring and synthetic, food chemicals. We had Shauna Swan, whom some people might know of. She did her work on phthalates was in that textbook. So it was called Integrative Environmental Medicine. Then I did a consumer book with Dr. vom Saal in the same series of Dr. Andrew Weil has two different series in the Oxford University Press book series. So he has the academic library, which I encourage anyone to check out. It's remarkable. And there's also this consumer series, which is more, I think, readable for the general public. So we did that a few years back, and that was remarkable, very dense. And this book, Detoxify, I'll go show it to you. Usually I have my dog out here with me. So this book, Detoxify, is the first book I've done that's a consumer book, and meaning that it's really simple, practical. The information, the science is very reasonable, and it was the first chance I had to put in the paradigm of how I see managing this very difficult, very broad topic. People get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed. I've been overwhelmed with the topic of toxins, environmental chemicals, and it was the way I teach doctors now. I put that into play, high school, college. So I put together like a paradigm called the 4 A's. There's a 50 question, survey, just an environmental or lifestyle survey to see where these chemicals are coming from. There's 100 foods that are detoxifying that you should consider. There's lots of bells and whistles. So that's how I got into this book, was really to say it's time to let the general public have, really good information and tools to do this work.
Well, I love it, of course, and I have in my PCOS SOS series, I talk so much about
Yeah.
many toxicants, especially the most researched for PCOS is BPA,
Yeah.
and they would say, "Oh, it's okay. The levels in the mom are below dangerous," as if they knew. But it turns out that BPA, like many things, it actually levels that are multiple times higher what's in the blood level of the mother. So it's so critical for everyone, whatever stage of life you're in, whether you're a kid, right? Even kids can be aware of
Yeah.
all,
Sure.
and of course, moms to be, and whatever age you're in, that these chemicals are so interfering. The whole topic of diabesogens, chemicals that interfere with our metabolic functioning and so on. And it's so encouraging that there are doctors like you because the conventional medical world hasn't really been very forthcoming in explaining to patients that some of the ills that they're actually dealing with are environmentally caused. That it's not just, well, you're not getting up and moving enough. That counts a lot too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of personal choices that can be really dramatically beneficial. And then there are things that we can't always control, like wildfires, air quality, and so on. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, I know it's in your book, but talk about like a few really key suggestions for what people can do given what they can and can't control to so they have a few really helpful hints of what they can do in terms of making life choices in terms of what they buy, what they use
Right.
to opt cellular function and basically not be overloaded with toxicants.
So, yeah, high yield things. So, number one, I want people to understand you have to start with the very, very beginning. Chemicals are unregulated in the United States for the most part. Okay. Those chemicals that go into our products on the shelves, the cosmetics, the cleaning products, the spray guards that are on our couches that we use, that I use, all of these chemicals are unregulated and untested. And the ones that are tested have been tested by third party academic centers, not required by manufacturers themselves to test these chemicals before they go into the products that we use every day on our skin, on our, on our home furnishings, on our kids, even in our pets, right? So that's a really important thing that took me a long time to wrap my head around. We have the FDA for drugs. We have USDA organic for food as measure of cleaner versions of food, of what's allowed in food. But aside from that, we really, I mean, EPA covers a certain number of chemicals at a certain level, as you mentioned, but arguably maybe not good enough for human health exposure over time and by volume. So we're really left to our own devices to make these things happen for ourselves. And that has always changes that different administrations are taking on, right? I've been through two Democratic, one Republican, leaders. It's so slow what we see in terms of the actual changes in regulation, that my argument has always been support regulation, certainly, but do it for yourself, because in our lifetime we won't have the amount, we won't be able to regulate fast enough to manage what's going on in the human health situation right now in terms of chronic and acute conditions. So top things to think about by far what we ingest, because we have to eat and we have to drink every day. So I really like people to think about the quality of their food, starting with the big picture, which is ultra processed or processed foods. Ultra being a little bit more processed, obviously, than just regular processed foods in terms of the numbers of chemicals that go in to those products. But essentially, the more processed foods you have in your daily life, the more you're going to be exposed to a variety of chemicals that we now know can be harmful to weight gain, obesogenic chemicals, immune disrupting chemicals, as I've coined them in the book. They can affect the immune system. As you mentioned, there are chemicals that affect our metabolism, but essentially these are all lumped into the word toxins. so that people have a better idea of what to be wary of. Um, but food, once you get past the processed foods and you can start to sort of layer in cleaner, foods in general, whole foods, you want to start thinking about even deeper quality, which is either washing your produce, which are considered whole foods, right? Not messed with after they're grown. You want to clean them up a little bit from a pesticide exposure perspective, because we know pesticides are linked to so many problems, including the recent news on pesticides in golf courses and living near golf courses, how that gets into waterways. We know that from pesticides that are sprayed on produce that can affect the gut microbiome, which I know your audience is probably aware of. So USDA organic is a really important designation. It is not perfect, but it is very important because it actually requires very few. There's thousands less pesticides that are allowed to be sprayed on these produce, but also in the farming and used as fertilizer in the soil.
Just like, right, we know we have data, hardcore data now, like you mentioned, like pesticides and Parkinson's disease,
Correct.
multiple myeloma,
Yep.
cancer. So these are not abstract. We know that these things are, really, really harmful to the body in a host of ways. Like you said, immune disruptors, and they affect the functionality of the liver. It's really amazing what these chemicals can do. I mean, when you think about the origins of these, like nerve toxin,
Yeah.
they're killing live creatures, and we're live creatures.
Right.
So
Right, for sure. And these are also, this data is in the medical literature. It's not like this is just some abstract fringe world. Like, people have to understand, like, they're not even teaching this in medical school when they're in medical journals, these wonderful studies, epidemiological studies of populations, occupational studies of people who work in the farming industry, the farming world, farmers themselves, farmers' spouses. We have so much good information on this that it's just remarkable how it's not getting into training. But another thing is, it's hard for a lot of people to take that kind of information and put it into practical changes, which is what I was trying to do with the previous books, and still now with this book, is how do you take that information, and instead of being so fearful you shut down, how do you take that and actually put into actionable choices, products that we change, what quality of food, how we wash our food, what drinking water quality, and how to filter. It's very simple, practical stuff. You just have to connect the dots.
I'm going to ask you a question that always gets asked, especially as we're getting into summer. Okay. And how to use sun blocks, or, what chemicals would you recommend are okay, if any, to put on the skin of yourself or kids to try to lower some of the excessive radiation? It will say harms the UV light from too much sun exposure. So during this is a perpetual challenge
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. And the market keeps changing and it gets better and better. But here are the simple tenets that I would say, because I have two kids that play sports and I run. And so there's sweat issues. There's some, my kids don't like lotion versus sprays and all that stuff. So there's a lot of convenience components. But from a chemical perspective, you want to stay away from avobenzene, oxybenzone, which are the predominant chemicals in most sunscreens. You want to stick to titanium dioxide, which has its own some issues there, but I would say the best choice is zinc oxide. Anything with the zinc oxide. Do you remember back in the day? I mean, some of your people are a lot younger watching, but when you had like the lifeguard always had like the nose with the triangle and the white nose. That actually has always been and still is the safest type of sunscreen. Now, fast forward, we have versions that are tinted, that are sprayable, that don't come out as clunky and clumpy. But essentially, it sits on the surface of the skin. It does not get absorbed through the outer layer of the skin into the bloodstream. So you don't see blood levels of those chemicals that are either titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. And what I would say is, because titanium has some issues recently, certainly in the food industry, from ingesting it, it's hard to extrapolate to the skin. But it's something that people might want to just choose zinc versus titanium dioxide. And you want to avoid nanoparticles, because nanoparticles seem to be something sellable, but really not such a great thing when it comes to your skin because it means it's greater absorption into the bloodstream. You also want to try if you're, especially certainly if you have any lung disease or asthma, you want to avoid any spray sunscreens because you can inhale quite a bit, even though you don't think you are. And that can exacerbate or trigger asthma and other issues. So, yeah, I mean, I look for products that are basically certified by Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, or their app Healthy Living. Also, Clearia is a wonderful app, Yucca, Think Dirty. These are all using a lot of the same databases, believe it or not. They're just formatted in a different way for convenience, but they're wonderful free apps to look up makeup. I do this with my high school students and college students. It's a really simple thing. My kids have to use it. But yeah, so that's a good start. And yeah, there's a lot of, better products out there now because people are listening to who's buying. And there's a shift in the market towards safer, cleaner products, even sunscreens.
Now, another question that always comes up is fish. Okay. Like, how can you reduce exposure to heavy metals like mercury? And what about microplastics and the other that are out there in our said waterways and so on. And is farm fishing okay, not okay? How do you know the source? I don't know if you could, because a lot of people love fish. So it used to be like the healthiest food that you could choose, but now it's sort of big question mark. So just a couple of comments on fish.
Yeah, so I love fish and I love sushi. So this is a real dilemma, especially in my family. But we space sushi out and we choose salmon mostly because you want to go with bigger fish. I mean, sorry, smaller fish. Oof, that was a big faux pas. The big fish, if I can explain this, what happens with big fish is that they eat middle fish, medium-sized fish, medium fish eat small-sized fish, and as the food chain is chomping up little stuff all the way down to the algae, which the little fish eat, we're bioaccumulating is the word, bioaccumulating anything, including, potentially microplastics, PCBs that were banned back in the 70s that still are in our waterways, and mercury, methyl mercury, all the way through up the food chain. So big fish tend to have the most mercury in general, PCBs and problems. So it just makes sense to try to at least limit as much as you can big fish, certainly during pregnancy, as you would say. Possibly, I would argue during pre-pregnancy if you're planning to have kids. And I would say even in young kids and younger people because smaller bodies have a harder time detoxifying from a lot of these exposures, right? So young people are a little more vulnerable. It's a vulnerable period. The other thing to think about is not just smaller fish, but how they might be packaged. So, for instance, sardines in glass are a better choice than maybe anything in a can, because can happens to be lined by plastic, an epoxy lining, but it may not be easy to find. So you have to, that risk benefit. Fish are remarkably healthy in terms of the protein, in terms of beta carotene, in terms of the algae they're eating. So there's such a value to eating fish that you just have to weigh it against wild caught, which is always preferable, smaller fish, which is always preferable. And you can also, there's some apps. I think I put one in the book, and certainly I've posted on this before. There are apps like Monterey Bay Aquarium that has an app that you can look up sustainability. You can look up, I was eating lobster when we went to Maine on a vacation and I had a lot of lobster. And I thought, I wonder since they're on the bottom of the ocean, I wonder what their exposure level is in general. Turns out contaminated as well. So I kind of, pulled back a little bit in terms of my enjoyment of lobster. But, the idea is that you don't want to be so stressed that you do nothing. You want to live your life, but you want to be thoughtful. And that's what I try to put into the book, some easy stuff to think about.
And it has you to give one more little bit of takeaways. Okay. You mentioned foods that help you detoxify. Could you name a couple so
Yeah.
that everybody have them for dinner tonight?
Ooh, well, go out and get your green veggies like your mom always said you should eat, right? Broccoli, especially the cruciferous vegetables. And I had to look this up because I don't love to cook all that much, believe it or not. I didn't even realize there's a world of cruciferous vegetables that I never even heard of, let alone ate or tried. And I have the whole list in the book. But the idea is that cruciferous vegetables, by definition, really have some of the most important powerhouse compounds to help upregulate the liver's ability to break down a lot of the chemicals that we're seeing in modern day times that our body has never seen before. And it just turns out that that's how cruciferous vegetables can really work. So they're kind of powerhouses. We also have the sulfur foods that are like alliums, onions, shallots, scallions. They are really, I mean, they're not great for your breath, I guess, but they're super great for, who cares, right? They're great for helping to detoxify the body. Fiber, which is something I was just talking with Will Bolshewitz, who writes books on fiber. He and I were chatting about how fiber is so critical to sort of absorbing as a sponge like substance, really can help in the gut microbiome, which we're always trying to protect and clean up. It's the biggest immune system organ in the body, from my perspective. Um, so I think fiber is something we can get just from eating plant-based foods anyway. So yeah, quality matters. Fiber, eating anthropologically, like what we used to eat millions of years ago, is always a good thing. But yeah, nothing wacky, nothing fringe, but really just eating wonderful foods that support our actual detoxifying processes is really the way to go.
Well, I love it. Yeah, the fiber binds, you poop it out too.
Poop is good.
And
We like poop because it keeps your GI system working and lowers risk for a variety of cancers, including colon, as you know. So, we got to get our fiber up.
hold your book up and show them the title and tell them where they can get a hold of a copy.
So it's available, I guess, most people online. It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, a couple smaller booksellers that are online as well. Certainly support local as well in the bookstores. And you can go to my website, thesmarthuman.com, where I actually not only have the book, but I'm also doing small courses for people who want to dive into, say, heavy metals as a course, detoxifications as a course. I have one on pesticides, and I'll be throwing up a lot more as I find time to do them for people who are interested in more active information and involvement.
Well, you and I have always thought alike, and we're just out there trying to educate and
Yeah.
help everyone. Thank you so much for writing this book
Uh,
and sharing everything possible to reduce exposures and eliminate the ones that we get into us. I think it's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge.
Thank you for having me and sharing me with your audience, because you're doing wonderful work and we've always connected with our missions and everything we do. So it's been a pleasure and I appreciate you having me on.
Time. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.